your question, Tess?
I guess how do you stay so prolific? I've turned my husband on to you.
Oh, thank you.
He loves your writing. There's so many jokes, and you're tackling really dense material, and you're putting something out every day. And I know how hard that is. So
yeah, you just try.
Secret?
Yeah, you just try. You try to write every day. Come in, find something. It's interesting because this, the site itself, the newsletter is called the Play Typer Guy. I try to combine, media coverage and political coverage, but we still live in a world where I guess the Facebook algorithm, everyone is still more interested in the political than the sort of artistic. I would hope it was otherwise, but they tell you that, right? They tell you that we don't want to get angry, but then people do get angry. It's it's a weird thing.
And here's what I found after my video. They want you to be angry. It's like reverse Hulk, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't have a great shakes of followers, but I've got like 14,000 on my fan page on Facebook, and I had at one point about 10 on Twitter. And if I had sold 24,000 copies of every one of my books, I'd be a really happy person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like, well, once you're known for one thing, they want to keep, that's what they want to know you for. And they don't want to know that, like, oh, but you can't be mad about politics all the time. So I also write these murder mysteries. I don't know. Do you find that they only respond if you're pissed off about politics?
That tends to be the stuff that gets a lot of traction. I do. I mean, I one of the things when I started this podcast specifically is I wanted to talk to, so it wasn't so much about here's this terrible thing Marjorie Taylor Greene did. Here's someone interesting doing something that is good in the world, and let's have a conversation. And to have more conversations, and I think people are still sort of sometimes want to like, oh, I love it when you make fun of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is not as much fun. She's not that much of an interesting character to write about. It's sort of a friend of mine who sort of does Shakespeare, and she was years ago said that Trump is not a particularly compelling villain. He has so few redeeming qualities, and it's actually more interesting. Sort of the tragedy would be the people close to him who knew better but sacrificed things for power, right? And for proximity. So like Nikki Haley as the center protagonist of a story, and how she's sort of in Trump in the background is more compelling than a Trump story per se. And I found that, and I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is sort of similar. Like, I think she's just someone who's probably there's never been conflict. So she's probably always bad. I don't know. Maybe she could be interesting.
To your point about wanting to do this podcast, a couple months ago when I was on TikTok more often, I said, let's talk about amplification, because we don't amplify the good stuff. We share the bad stuff. We like to tear down. We like to, if Marjorie Taylor Greene does something stupid, we like to share that. If Amy Klobuchar goes on a TV show and talks about why the Senate passed a bill, nobody's sharing that. And so what happens is people go, well, the Democrats aren't messaging. And I'm like, well, who do you follow on Twitter? Who do you follow on Instagram? They're posting stuff all day, every day. Are you not sharing the message? Like, what are you doing to get it and pass it on? And there is something I think instinctive about all of us right now, where we're much more comfortable tearing down, even if people deserve to be like Marjorie Taylor Greene. We should be, sharing the evil that she is, but we're not matching it equally or more so with uplifting the people doing good.
Yeah, because then it's just, there are people who think, and Nancy Mace is a good example of that, right? Like, there was a period where you could see the decision she made in 2020. She's someone who doesn't like Marjorie Taylor Greene. She would not want to sit near her sit with her at the table and realize, well, okay, well, this is the path to fame and fortune. And then I could try to be a reasonable Republican or Liz Cheney Republican, and that's not going to get me anywhere. I'm going to go this direction because people go where, sadly, they view that the money is. And March the Green has gained a lot of power influence without actually doing anything decent for anyone and for no. And I mean, again, to date myself, I remember reading about young Senator Dan Quayle, and it was all about the politics of credit. So the politics is about, okay, well, of course, he co-sponsored legislation with Ted Kennedy, which now the idea of a young Republican senator, immediately working with Bernie Sanders on something, even if there was a common ground, he would never do. But he was like, it wasn't about like, oh, you shouldn't work with Ted Kennedy. It was just that, well, of course, Ted Kennedy got all the credit because he's Ted Kennedy. And this was just like the guy standing next to him. No one knew. And it was like, oh, you needed to make sure that, young Danforth Quayle did this and got some credit for it. But like now we're no longer the politics of the possible. It's just the politics of the impossible, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. You should, Hakeem Jeffries did a really good podcast with Hillary Clinton. I don't know if you've heard it or not. It's like a year thing about building coalition, which was kind of interesting because it was a more positive. He's like, well, here's how you do it. I don't look for the usual suspects. I look for the unusual suspects who might have common ground with something I'm trying to do because of this. And it was one of those things that doesn't make you feel like you're like, oh, there's still people, able to work together on things, and how nice is that? And about working across the aisle, you just might find it just for your own. You'd probably find it interesting.
Yeah,
but,
well, I will definitely check that out.
I know. I'm like, now I'm just talking to you. So,
no.
we're just catching up.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And again, I've always sort of admired your work. And I know I'm always impressed because as someone who was often the only one who looked like myself in rooms, I know it's listed on the soup, you're the only woman writer. To be sort of it's tough. It's very impressive to achieve what you have achieved, often being the only, especially in comedy. It's a very Bernie bro heavy environment. And you were sort of it's very impressive because you're a very openly Hillary supporter, and not to assume, but from my own experience, it's an environment that tends to be pretty anti-Hillary, so that's kind of cool.
Well, thank you. I think it's it's an environment that tends to be really myopic, right, with whatever their own real world experiences are, which is, why you have to pass in the room, you have to be able to take the jokes or whatever it is. And I think it does and you know what, this is in other businesses. I've heard people talk about different things lately about various other industries and how they're very similar to those attitudes about anyone who's not white, straight, and male has to, assimilate and try to make it through and be the only one in the room. And I think it really, you can see the exact parallel to what's happened in Democratic politics, what happened in 2016 that got us here, in which, please won't happen again. And I really hope doesn't happen again in 2024. But it is that, they think they're liberal, but they don't want to hear a perspective that's not their own.
No, I mean, that was experience. It was just, I'd written for Spy magazine. It's my first job out of college in the mid-90s. And it was like, oh, wow. My first confrontation with like overt sort of liberal racism and misogyny. So it's kind of like everyone, they hated. So everyone really hated Spike Lee. They really hated Hillary Clinton even then. So I think that was not a surprise. It was just sort of that kind of, and it's tough. I mean, it's interesting. As a writer yourself, you watch these narratives, and I was thinking, yeah, Hillary's from when Jan Hooks was playing her in the early 90s through to Amy Poehler, she's presented as a calculating, cold person. Like even the satire, and Will Ferrell said he feels bad that he kind of presented Bush as a lovable dope sitcom dad. Like that was a
Yeah.
joke, myself and the spin. Whereas for women, it's not that. It was like, it's not like, oh, the lovable dope, love it. No, it's like you're this calculating, awful person. And that tends to be kind of reinforced. Even, a show like Veep, which I think is great, it's funny, but unfortunately it doesn't exist in a context where there's a, woman-centered version of the West Wing where, Hillary Clinton is the
Yeah.
president that everyone loves and respects. And oh yeah, she can be difficult sometimes and demand, but it's worth it because she's such a great inspirational leader. Like, those are stories that we just don't see, right?
Yeah, that we don't see about women. And I think it's important, like, to be clear, it's not it's not every guy, and it's not every guy all the time, but it is this little insidious way that you're judging people who aren't like you on a curve that
Mhm.
doesn't, favor them. And, it's having to maybe modulate your voice a little bit more if you're a person of color so you don't sound angry, or if you're a woman so you don't sound strident or angry or anything, or, make sure that if you're, being in control, if you're managing a room, you're also kind of nice about it. And, when it seeps into what we're talking earlier about portrayal. I don't know if you watched Gaslit, the thing with Julia Roberts and Sean
Mhm.
Penn about Martha Mitchell. So that storyline was great and realistic, and very true to what seems to have really happened. But on the side note, and I've seen this in other projects lately, we're we're portraying a lot of the Watergate criminals and burglars like buffoons these days. And we're having them played by comedians, and it's kind of funny. And I'm thinking, like, these are not people we should be making light of. And yet in a couple of different projects, it's like being played for comedy almost. And I go, well,
No,
that's yeah.
they're sinister folk. They won. It's something I was writing about this the other day of like, you know, Reagan occurs just 6 years after
Yes.
Nixon leaves in disgrace, and you would look at the 70s and then you would look at the Reagan Revolution and 12 years of Republican rule, far right. It's like, oh, Jimmy Carter was the one who committed felonies in office. No, oh, he didn't. Like, wait a minute, what happened? And it was, and I think we do tend to um, make that like make far too light of it, or light of and we always present men as just as great guys and a great side. I mean, I struggle with that with covering Hillary Clinton as well, because she herself was openly like, she's a wonk, she's smart, and so there's part of it's like, okay, well, maybe she lost because she was like Dukakis or Kerry or Mondale, who are all good. They were good men, but here's why they couldn't win the ultimate popularity contest. And then it was like, people like yourself and other women pointed out of like, well, Hillary is such an engaging, compelling person, but was never in a situation where that person was who could be communicated, to put in the context of this woman who was born in the 40s and like trying to, exist in this world. Um, it's interesting. I mean, I'm the first election I voted for was 92. And so I remember Hillary as this very young, comparatively, person. And I understand how radical she was viewed.
Yeah.
I try to explain it to people if it's just like, you know, um, 30 years from now, and it's AOC who seems like this, young people be wondering like, why is what are you talking about? AOC isn't radical. She's a 70, she's a 65-year-old woman, and she's an anti who I don't know, she's boring. She's stuff, they will forget everything that was once radical about her. But ironically, her opponents on the right will never forget. So
Yeah.
they will be presenting of like, she's going to come in, they'll still be talking about Green New Deal no matter how pantsuit she is. So it's like this sense of like, women and like even minority, will be stuck in a sense of how do you appeal to, the youth of the Democratic Party just sees you as, the boring aunt, boring grandmother. And
Right.
then, but Republicans don't see that. They still see like, she's going to burn down my house. And it's just like, what are you talking about? So where's that balance?
Yeah. Where's the, in the respect for, well, you learn how things are done, and you learn what the flaws are, and you revamp your plans, and you learn how to seek compromise. Her great quote, I believe that if you're a progressive, you should make progress. It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not always perfect, but something's better than nothing, which just really should be on the DNC like
Well,
flag.
a lot of I don't like to use those derisive terms, but it's to a certain degree it's true. Bernie bros or far leftists we're seeing of like attacking AOC and saying how she disappointed them, and it's just like I would lead their complaints, and then I would look at what had happened, and it was like, oh, she just got better at her job.
Yeah. She learned how
That's
government works. Yeah.
That's your and she's old, like she's matured and learned better at her job, and you're not. It's like you're very happy. Like the Marjorie Taylor Greene show can run for 20 years because she's still doing the Benny Hill stuff, running around, and they're happy with that'll never change, never grow. And but the AOC show is growing and changing. It's different each season because she's actually learning. She's not just person walking into rake every episode, but that's what certain people want. They want like yelling at clouds or yelling at they're upset with like what could be a complex situation, obviously a complex situation with Israel policy and Middle East policy, and they have this idea of like, well, do the most extreme thing possible and and we'll win, and as if they don't understand how coalitions work, which is again about you've got
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I can't risk pissing off these people. So even if I agreed with you completely, I need to not piss off these people, and there are more of them.
Yes.
So
And we all vote on this. So it's, to get the most people to vote, to get anything to happen, you're going to need to, come up with something that's going to appeal to a lot of people. So, yeah, even if two people, yeah, we might agree over here, but we might only be 5%. And none of us have a magic wand to just make whatever we want policy.
oh yeah, I mean, Joe Stein could offer you a lot of stuff because she's not going to deliver it. But
I'll end on this if we end on this, or you can cut it out for what it's worth. But white women have done a lot of terrible things, and we have had a lot of questionable behavior, and I will never say otherwise. But one of the worst things we ever did was we taught white men the phrase white women. So it's like now they just like weaponize it, like to deflect from them all the time. Like, oh,
Mhm.
it's just white women saying that. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like,
No, no.
now it's this boogeyman. When Bill Burr is like complaining about white women on SNL, I'm like, oh, because you're deflecting from you. You know,
Oh yeah. I'd
it's
seen that
like,
as the same thing. It's like it's a way of attacking. There was a lot of that on I've seen that on TikTok or women as a sort of like, oh, you're just hitting women you don't like, as opposed to not to be
you
the
are a
punch up,
white
punch
guy in the
down.
net,
It's like,
right? You are a white guy with a tennis racket, literally deflecting a volley by going
oh
like,
yeah,
I will take it from anybody who's not a white man. Like that's my thing is like, yeah, she won't get any argument from me. Yeah, we're idiots. We vote against our interests. Yeah, we're stupid. Yeah, like whatever. We've done bad things. Yes, we like at PSL, whatever. But I'm like, not fuck you, white men. Like,
no, I
it's
mean, look,
yeah.
yeah. So it's a white. I don't even think it's against your interests. It's like there's a sense of the people who vote Republican. They see the world a certain way, and those white women believe that they are safer, more secure, that Trump's going to protect them from me. It's hurtful to be like, you need the rapist to protect you from me. Okay. But I get it. But I mean, a lot of the cultural stuff came from like, yeah, like getting white guys. And it's like, and but like the brutality of the world comes from you, and you are the most sensitive snowflakes. But yeah, that misogyny was so, and they love it, like so much of their art. And I've watched the artist. So much of it is reflective of that misogyny. And look, it's okay to like The Godfather or Fight Club or all these movies. I've liked some of them, but these guys these guys think that's all of it, right? And so they don't want to, to me, it's like I'm someone who's like, I'll watch The Godfather, but then I want to have a mystery novel headed by a woman. I want to see that perspective, and I want to see that fun, and the way women interact is interesting to me. And I think the people who are just like, there's only the one way, that's just kind of, that's boring and disappointing. But thanks so much. You've been a delight to chat with.
Thank you. Much the same. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you online.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.